A white manager wouldn't cash a black client's check, which made her feel bad and made people question the legitimacy of her money. It wasn't clear to him that she owned the bank. What came next will shock even the most experienced onlookers, but let's go back to the beginning. When Mr. Paul Wakefield, head of a well-known downtown bank, woke up, it was just like any other day. In the morning sun, the branch's shiny white columns stood tall, and he was ready for another day of dealing with rich clients and doing the same things that made him famous in the business world. After that, she came in. Many clients and staff members were quickly drawn to her because of her height and confident posture. She walked up to the bar wearing a sharp business suit and carrying a beautiful leather briefcase. "Good morning. I'd like to deposit this check into my account," she told the young cashier in a calm voice. The cashier took a quick look at the amount and tightened up. It was a big amount of money. As soon as she calmed down, she led the woman to the manager's office. "This is a pretty big amount of money, ma'am. We need you to talk to our manager," the cashier said in a low voice. The woman nodded and walked toward the office with a steady face. The cashier told him, "Mr. Wakefield, there's a customer here with a big check." As soon as Paul saw the guest, he looked up from his papers, and his face turned darker. He had been a banker for a long time and knew that this customer was not normal for his branch. But he quickly put on a professional front to hide his feelings. He asked, "How can I help you?" He asked quickly, giving the woman only a fleeting glance. "What can I do to help?" She calmly told him, "I'm here to deposit this check into my account." Then she put the check on his desk. Paul slowly took the paper in his hands and looked it over with a hint of mistrust. He said, "This is a pretty big amount of money. I need to check where these funds came from. It's the normal thing to do." "The check has all the necessary paperwork and contacts on it," the woman said in a steady voice. "You can call my law office to make sure the deal is official. Even so, I'll have to put off this deal until I can do more checks," Paul reluctantly answered. "Could you please provide more proof that your business is real?" The woman made a small frown, but she kept her voice calm. "My company is following all the rules. You have everything you need. I expect that this deal will be handled quickly. I choose when and how things are handled here," Paul replied, slightly raising his voice. The tone of his voice caught the attention of the staff, who peeked out from behind their seats. Hannah, the young checker, stepped in at this point. "Mr. Wakefield, I've seen this client do big business with our bank before. I know what her name is." Paul turned back to the client and said, "Hannah, you're fired. You can file a complaint if you want to, but I have the right to look into any check I think is fishy." While sighing, the woman kept her cool. "All right then, I need to talk to the bank's leaders. I believe they will be interested in how you are investigating these claims." Paul Wakefield looked at the check some more, even though he had all the necessary paperwork in front of him. The mood in the office got more and more tense. He purposely didn't use her name when he said, "Listen, miss," even though her papers were right in front of him. "That's just my job. For amounts this big, you have to get them checked. I understand your concern for protocol, Mr. Wakefield, but I doubt that this delay is in line with the bank's internal rules," she said coldly, putting her hands over her briefcase. "You have all the papers you need. If there is a problem, you haven't said what it is." Paul paused, and his voice got sterner. "The issue is that amounts like this don't happen very often with clients like you." It looked like the woman's eyes sharpened for a moment, but she didn't say anything. She took out her phone instead. "Okay, I'll call someone who can handle this deal if you can't." Hannah saw that things were getting out of hand, so she quietly went up to Paul and said, "Mr. Wakefield, I'm sorry, but I'm sure her account is in good standing. This customer puts a lot of money into the bank. She has done business like this before." Paul quickly cut her off and waved her off. "Hannah, you already have a lot to do. Go back to it." Hannah quickly apologized to the client while blushing and then walked away. The woman was already on the phone. Her voice was calm but strong. "Yes, please put me in touch with the leadership team. It's important. I'm having trouble at one of your stores processing a check. Thanks. Paul became nervous, but he tried to keep his cool. He tried to get back in charge by saying, "No matter who you call, they'll tell you the same thing: procedures need to be confirmed. That's not going to change." The office door opened at that very moment, and a well-dressed middle-aged woman walked in. It was Jenny Marie, who was in charge of the region for the bank. Her face showed a mix of annoyance and professionalism. She looked around the room and asked, "What's going on here?" Paul got up and looked shocked. "Zhang, I didn't expect you. There's a big deal that needs to be checked regularly, and we are doing just that." When Jenny looked at the client, her face immediately softened. "Sorry, Miss Bennett. I didn't know you were here. Is something wrong?" The client looked at Paul for a moment and then back at Jenny. Her voice stayed steady, but she spoke slowly and carefully. "It looks like Mr. Wakefield thinks my check needs extra attention. It looks like he's worried about something other than the amount." Jenny closed her eyes and understood what was meant. "Paul, you do know who our clients are, right?" Her voice became cold. "Of course," Paul said in a shaky voice. "I just want to make sure everything is okay." Jenny spoke up and said, "That's enough, Paul. Miss Bennett, your transaction will be taken care of right away. Please wait in the lounge. I'll be there to make sure it goes smoothly," Jenny told Paul firmly, cutting him off. The woman looked at Paul for a moment as she left the office. It was clear from the look in her eyes that this wasn't over. Paul spoke up, but Jenny put up her hand and stopped him. "You just did something very wrong," she said in a cold, sharp voice. "There will be consequences." Paul turned pale as he realized he couldn't stop what was happening. Jenny Marie carefully brought Hyacinth Bennett into the meeting room, gave her a glass of water, and told her that the problem would be fixed quickly. At the same time, Paul Wakefield was sitting alone in his office, his back cold with sweat. He knew how bad his mistake was, but it was too late to change his mind. Now that his job at the bank was in danger, he worked hard to come up with a reason. After a short time, Jenny came back to his office with a serious face and a sharp speech. She started, "Paul, do you know who you just talked to?" Without saying anything else. "A client with a suspicious check," he said straight out, trying to stay calm. "Aren't I supposed to check big amounts?" Jenny smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Wonderful." The suspicious check was written from her own business account. "Now I want to ask you, why did you think it was important to verify? Is this how you usually handle people, or did you use a different method?" Paul started to mumble something about safety and rules, but Jenny put up her hand and stopped him. "Enough," she yelled. "Sure you didn't even look at her portfolio?" A folder was thrown on his desk by her. Jenny's tone turned cold as she said, "Let me show you what you missed. Let me remind you who Hyacinth Bennett is. She owns more shares in our bank than anyone else. She has a big stake in the company, and she could fire you with just one phone call." His face turned pale as if he had just heard that his fate was sealed. Paul stopped moving. He said in a whisper, This must be a mistake. I had no way of knowing. You should have," Jenny said in response. "What's even worse, it was more than just a mistake. You let your views get in the way of doing your job. That's not okay." In the meeting room, Hyacinth calmly looked over her papers, but her sharp eyes showed that she was fully focused. Hannah came in with a tray holding a folder and a glass of water. The knock on the door woke her up. Hannah said in a soft voice, "Miss Bennett, I'm sorry I bothered you." "Thank you for waiting." Hyacinth gave a warm smile. "Thank you, Hannah. That says a lot about you that you tried to help." Hyacinth took out her phone and called a number after Hannah left. Within seconds, her voice was full of confidence and determination. "Hello, Alice. This is Hyacinth. Please get the senior team together and set up a time to meet. We need to talk about how one of our branches is run." "Yes, it's important." At the same time, Jenny went back to the meeting room with a still tense face. "Everything is ready, Miss Bennett. We've taken care of your check. Let me take this chance to say I'm truly sorry for what happened." Hyacinth got up and gathered her papers. Her voice was steady and even. "Zhang, you're not to blame. But I can't let this go on in my bank. We're going to talk about something important. People who worked at and went to the branch watched her leave in silence. Paul stood by the window of his office and watched as his career fell apart right in front of his eyes. The next day, Hyacinth Bennett sat at the head of the table in the large meeting room at the main office of the bank. Key members of the management team were sitting across from her. Jenny Ellis, who looked tense, and Paul Wakefield, who was desperately trying to save what little respect he still had, were also there. Hyacinth started to talk in a calm but strong voice. What happened yesterday was wrong, and we need to fix it. What happened at your branch wasn't just a mistake, Hyacinth said in a steady, firm voice. It's a sign of a bigger problem. As the bank's biggest shareholder, I think it's my duty to do something about this. She looked at Zhang. Zhang, as a professional, it's your job to make sure that all branches follow the rules of equality and respect. It's not okay what happened yesterday. Jenny agreed and nodded, but Paul couldn't keep quiet. Miss Bennett, let me explain. It was the normal thing to do. I didn't mean to. His speech was cut off when Hyacinth raised her hand. Paul, don't try to explain yourself. Your choice of standard procedures was unfair. You didn't look at my papers, depended on bias, and didn't do your job. It's not about following the rules, it's about how you act. Paul was about to answer, but he stopped when she gave him a cold look. Hyacinth went on and spoke to the rest of the team. This bank depends on its customers trusting it. We'll lose that trust if we let things like this keep happening. This is about more than just Paul. It's about the whole system. That's why I'm suggesting real changes. She set out papers for them to look at. First, all staff must go through training on how to be inclusive and understand other cultures. Second, a study of all internal processes to get rid of any bias. Third, setting up a way for both clients and workers to make complaints inside the company. Within a month, these steps will be put into place. The managers whispered to each other as they talked about her idea. Jenny was the first person to say she agreed. This has to be done. We can't let things like this hurt our image. Hyacinth looked at Paul. After yesterday, you know you can't stay where you are, don't you? Paul turned pale and didn't say anything. He knew that fighting was pointless. Hyacinth went on. You'll be given a choice. Resign with a letter of recommendation or there will be an investigation within the company. I think you should give it some thought. When the meeting was over, Hyacinth felt like she had accomplished a lot, but she still had work to do. Later that same day, she went back to the branch where the fight had happened. Hannah saw her and slowly walked up. Miss Bennett, it's nice to see you, Hannah said. Hyacinth gave a warm smile. Hannah, I saw how brave you were when you tried to help. That's an important trait. Get in touch with me if you want to move up in your job. I think the bank needs people like you to work there. Hannah turned red when she heard the praise. Clients and staff stood still as Hyacinth walked out of the building with her head held high. It wasn't just her bank anymore. It was a sign of how one person's resolve could change a whole system.